On today's Murder, She Wrote podcast, we find ourselves back in Cabot Cove, where strange letters are being sent to everyone in town except for Jessica, and she has to solve 2 murders. Let's get started. Hello, and welcome to the Murder, She Wrote podcast, where I watch every single episode of the hit 80s/90s show Murder, She Wrote, starring 3-time Academy Award nominee and 5-time Tony Award winner Miss Angela Lansbury. Today I'm going to be talking about Season 2, Episode 10, Sticks and Stones, air date December 15th, 1985. As always, if you're new to the Murder, She Wrote podcast, I spoil everything there is to spoil about the episode, including the murderer, the suspects, and everything in between. So if you've not seen this episode, please, like I've been doing, and watch them there. And if you recently saw this episode, sit back, relax, and let's see if we notice the same things. Well, I meant to, do this episode way before now, but I've been relaxing, and the weather has been crazy here, and this weekend is Derby, not that I'm going, and I had my first shot, and I have my second shot on May 13th, and everything's going well with that, so I hope everyone is doing good, and being safe out there. This was a very interesting episode. This marks the final appearance of John Austen, who plays the role of Harry Anderson. He had a small part in the second episode of Season 1, Hooray for Homicide, when Jessica goes to Hollywood. And then I believe he started being Harry Pierce the realtor, and Joshua Peabody died here possibly, and continued in a couple episodes before this one. And I'll give an overall impression of his character toward the end of the episode. This episode was entitled Sticks and Stones, and honestly, I don't understand why. It is a very weird title, and I don't get it. And I've watched the episode now twice. So, 3 counting the first time I watched it when I first got the DVDs. So, honestly, I don't know why the episode is called Sticks and Stones. I mean, no one is calling each other names, so, because, you got sticks and stones may break my bones, but I don't get it. If I was to rename this episode, what I know about it overall, I would name it The Letter Murder. The Letter Murder Killer or something. I don't know. Alright, let's start this episode, shall we? It was actually around this time in 1985 that I think The Color Purple premiered in theaters, and we're almost through, I think, with 1985. Great year. Wonderful music. The 80s had fantastic music. Alright, let's get started. So, we start off this episode in a random woman's house. She is watching a soap opera on a portable television. Oh, how I miss those. Those were just so great. They had the antenna on top. You could take it to any room, plug it in, you could get a channel. Why won't they bring them things back? But anyway, she's putting water in the tub, and she's getting it ready, and we cut to the basement, and the killer is lying in wait. He's waiting for her to do something, but we're not sure what he's waiting for. She disrobes, and she gets into the bathtub, and she's settling in, watching her soap opera, when suddenly the killer cuts the power. The portable television goes out. She gets out of the tub saying, "For a lousy $50, Larry, you could have fixed the damn TV set." Of course, she does not bother to dry herself off. She just walks over to the portable television, and she turns the knob, and when that does not work, she messes with the plug, and that's when the killer turns the power back on. She gets electrocuted and falls backwards into the tub, dead. And then we cut to Amos Tupper, played by Tom Bosley, Sheriff Amos Tupper, and a bunch of policemen arriving at the house. Now this is where the plot hole comes in. I don't know how anyone knew that she had fallen in. It happened so suddenly that I don't see how anyone was able to know or figure this out. Also, this is the first time that we actually see a murder being committed first before Jessica actually solves it. It kind of reminded me of Columbo, how on Columbo you would see the murderer and then Columbo would have to figure it out. And for me, that show was frustrating, and if it was frustrating for me in reruns, then I can only imagine what it must have been for people who watched it when it originally aired. They were probably constantly screaming at the TV, "The wife did it, the wife did it, how can you not figure this out?" I mean, yeah. So Amos shows up with Harry Pierce, the realtor, who's been the realtor in town for 20 years, who is going to be the new sheriff the following day. This makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. How does one go from being a real estate agent to a sheriff? It makes absolutely no sense to me. I mean, I don't know if you have to have a degree or you have to go through training or something. There's no motivation given as to why Harry suddenly wants to be a sheriff of the town. And we see that there are multiple people working at the police station because there's a lot of background extras that we see, especially when they arrive at it turns out the woman's name is Beverly Garrett. Not the same Beverly, and if it's Thursday it must be Beverly. A completely different Beverly. But they all show up, and I don't understand why none of them are sheriff. Why would the local real estate agent become the sheriff of the town? It makes absolutely no sense. So they go upstairs to the crime scene, the bathroom, and Amos says, "Well, this will be an open and shut case for my last one before I retire. It's an accident, plain and simple." "Yeah," Harry says. "I told her about that frayed cord when I came around 2 months ago to appraise the place, but I guess she never got around to fixing it." And Amos says she was going to sell her house, and he said, "No, she would always act like she was going to sell it, but then she'd turn around and change her mind. It wasted my time, I'll tell you that." "Oh," Amos says. We then cut to Jessica's house. She's on the phone with local town gossip, Evelyn, but I swear in other episodes her name was Emma. But in this episode, her name is Evelyn, I guess. So Evelyn is gossiping about Beverly Garrett's accident. Apparently she knows everything there is to know about it. Again, I don't know how, but she knows exactly how she got out of the tub soaking wet and fell back into the bathtub after being electrocuted. How does she know that? I mean, how did anyone know that she was dead? I don't get it. I don't get it. So Seth happens to be there. He's fixing Jessica's toaster, and he says, "Can you hang up with that blasted woman? I can hear her clear over here." I know that we're just getting introduced to Seth, but he is very mean in this episode for some reason. I don't know why. When Evelyn hears him, and she goes, "Is someone there with you, Jess?" And she says, "Oh, just Seth. Just Seth fixing my toaster, but I'm afraid he's not having much luck. I should just take it to Larry." And Seth says, "Well, I didn't realize I was repairing an antique." Suddenly the doorbell rings. Mrs. Fletcher ends her call with Evelyn, and she goes to the door, And this man, when she opens the door, he's smiling, he has glasses, and he goes, "This is just beautiful. This whole town is beautiful. Your house is beautiful." And he just walks in. He goes, "My name is Michael Digby. Clearly my publisher called to tell you I was coming. Oh yes, and by the way, I'll be staying here." And Mrs. Fletcher has no idea who this man is. And she's just like, "You said your name was Mr. Digby? Who are you? My publisher didn't call you? Oh, he is such an incompetent fool. Oh, this is just lovely. Will you just look at this wonderful place you have here? It's like something out of Ma's kitchen." And he goes, "This town is so lovely. Everything is so authentic, all the way down to the local town repairman." And he's talking about Seth. Seth, I guess, finds this insulting and gets up and says, "Well, I didn't realize you had company. I'm gonna go now." And as he gets up, he goes and he stops in front of Mr. Digby and he says, "Well, who is this?" And she goes, "Oh, I remember now, the travel writer." And he goes, "Well, then my publisher did call." She said, "Yeah, several months ago. I figured since I didn't hear anything, you weren't coming." And he says, "Oh, well, this was a spur of the moment thing, but I figured the invitation was still open." And then Seth says, "Son, are you from the city?" And he goes, "Why, yes, how did you guess? I'm from New York." He goes, "I thought so." And then he goes to walk out the door, and Mr. Digby says, "Now that's what I call a very ornery New Englander." And Seth gives him a really nasty look. He then points to Jessica's counter and goes, "Oh, will you look at that wonderful crock pot? I bet you've had it for generations. Maybe your family brought it over on the Mayflower or something." And Jessica says, "Actually, I just bought it yesterday at a yard sale." Oh boy. So the next morning, Jessica is out riding her bike when she encounters Seth in a new used car. He's going off to go fishing. He's no longer sheriff of the town, and he's wearing civilian clothes. Mrs. Fletcher basically says that she's not going to be able to get used to him being in citizen clothes. And she's not sure she can get used to Harry being sheriff since he used to be a real estate agent. Am I right, Mrs. Fletcher? Jeez. I still can't believe that one. I still can't believe it. It's just so hard. Like, how does one become a sheriff after being a real estate agent? I just don't know. So he goes off to go fishing, and later that same day, Mrs. Fletcher goes and shows Mr. Digby around town. She shows him the Cabot Cove Historical Society. He recounts the history of the town. It was settled originally in the 1600s, but there was a big, huge fire in the 1700s, and it was then reestablished in the 1800s and has been thriving ever since. She then says, yes, it's a peaceful, wonderful town, and they walk off. Well, just as they walk off, two random neighbors who are not part of the story receive letters from the postman, and apparently the letters say something about them, and they start going off on each other, then run into their houses to tell their respective spouses what they read. What was so bad about it, we never know. Like I said, they're not part of the story. So we then cut to a big stretch of land that looks like the cliff that Mrs. Fletcher almost went over in Hit, Run, and Homicide. You know, the scary remote control station wagon that was running people down? Yeah, really weird episode in season 1. It's here on my channel if you want to listen to that one. It was a really interesting episode. But I could be wrong. Mr. Digby says, this is beautiful. There's a beautiful view of the ocean. And Mrs. Fletcher says, oh yes, it used to be breathtakingly beautiful. There was a beautiful old wooden lighthouse that mysteriously burned down last year. And before that, it was coastal property. But when the lighthouse burned down, it is now community property. He says, well, has anyone ever tried to build anything here? And Mrs. Fletcher says, well, they tried to build a hotel, but that kind of fell through. She's referring to the episode Joshua Peabody Died Here Possibly, the first episode of season 2 that's set in Cabot Cove. And the reason why that fell through is because they found bones on the property, and then the main construction guy got killed. If you want to listen to that episode, it's also here on my channel. So, she then says, these three want to, and it's the condo 3. Yes, 2 men and Betsy Palmer from Friday the 13th randomly shows up in a limo for Jessica to basically say, yes, the condo 3, them people right there. And they just show up and then randomly disappear. We have no idea where they go. They're only there for Jessica to basically introduce them to Mr. Digby, or point them out to Mr. Digby and to point them out to us, the audience. And again, Mrs. Fletcher emphasizes the point that no one really wants the condominiums up there because this is a very peaceful town and they don't want to change it. Suddenly, Evelyn comes riding up in her car, runs up to Jessica, and tries to hit her with her purse and says, you stay away from my husband. Jessica, of course, has no idea what she's talking about. We then cut to Amos, who I guess has come back from fishing. He's in his outside of his house, sitting on a lawn chair. 2 hot dogs are sitting next to him, as well as some Coca-Cola. And he's listening to some music on some headphones. And the postman says, you enjoying retirement? He says, this is the life. Pure heaven. And the postman basically says, well, here's a letter for you. Don't strain yourself. Amos opens it, reads it, and says, well, I'll be damned. And then we cut to him at the sheriff's office. He says, Harry, I got a crank letter. And Harry goes, a crank letter, huh? Here, why don't you put it in the pile? Amos looks at the letters and says, what the hell is going on? First commercial break. We come back. We find ourselves at the docks. The same docks on the Universal Backlot where they shot part of Jaws. Yes, I learned that by watching a YouTube video of the Universal Backlot tour, which I would love to do someday, but I don't see it happening. But you never know. Mr. Anderson, not important to the story, is getting interviewed by an IRS man who says that he has not paid his taxes for 3 years, and it says so in the letter that he received. Mr. Anderson says, you're going to believe a stupid, crummy letter over me, and he says, yes. So the IRS man, backs off. Mrs. Fletcher shows up with her toaster to give it to Larry, who's also on the docks, and Larry goes, oh, not again, Miss Fletcher. And she says Seth tried to fix it, but unfortunately I think he ended up making it worse. And he then says, I never thought that Mr. Anderson would get accosted by the IRS, the local IRS man. He said, the whole town's gone crazy over these letters. And Mrs. Fletcher says, I didn't receive one. And Larry says, yeah, I didn't get one either. So suddenly, Adam shows up. Beverly's ex-husband, current husband, I'm not entirely sure, shows up and punches Larry and says, you killed my wife because you didn't fix her TV. And the cord was messed up. And Larry says, I fixed her TV. There was nothing wrong with the cord. Mr. Anderson interrupts, picks Adam up, throws him into the ocean. And he hits his head on a rock or something, because when he comes up, there's a huge gask on his head. Mr. Anderson takes him to the sheriff's office. And Seth shows up. Harry makes him go in the back to sleep it off because it's the law. And then we get introduced to a new character named Elvira. I know, they don't really have a lot of good names in this town, do they? Lots of L names. Lots of B names. I think they use the name Beverly a lot. That must have been the writer's favorite name. But anyway, she rents her apartment to a Mr. Morrison with a German accent. And he's accused her of something, so she decides to go to the sheriff's office. When she goes to the sheriff's office, Seth and Harry are going through the letters. And when she comes in to tell the sheriff to report Mr. Morrison to the sheriff, she says, Harry says, "You know, Seth, I really don't understand where all these letters came from." And Elvira says, "Letters? I only meant to send one." And Harry says, "What do you mean? You sent the first letter? Did you know what it said?" "No. I promised a friend. I'm gonna go now. I don't want my name dragged through the mud." She then stops at the door and says, "Something's very wrong here." And she leaves. We then cut to Mrs. Fletcher's house. She is messing around with her portable TV to try to figure out how someone can murder someone in a locked room with a perfectly good cord. Former Sheriff Tupper comes over. He knocks on Mrs. Fletcher's door, then walks right in. And he asks her what she's doing, takes an apple off the table and begins eating it. And he's wearing a new baseball jacket. Although I know I've seen this jacket on TV before. It's like this dark blue. I think I've seen it on Family Matters. I've probably seen it on a bunch of different television shows. But Amos says he went to a baseball game and bought himself the jacket. And when he asked Mrs. Fletcher, he says, "What are you doing?" And she says, "I'm trying to figure out exactly how you would kill someone in a locked bathroom with a television set." And he says, "Oh, you're talking about Beverly Garrett." And she says, "Yeah." And he says, "Well, Mrs. Fletcher, that was solved." And she says, "Oh no, Larry said that he fixed her television set. And that there was nothing wrong with the cord. So maybe somebody doctored it." And then she goes, "Oh, listen to me. I'm talking to you as if you're still sheriff. You don't want to hear my ranting and ravings anymore." And he goes, "It doesn't really bother me much." And she says, "Well, I think Harry might be having some doubts about keeping the job." He says, "Oh no, Mrs. Fletcher, I'm retired now and I'm enjoying it." Suddenly the phone rings, and it's Harry. He needs her help with the letters. She tells Amos about it, and they decide to head down there. They decide to head down there to basically see if they can help him. And that's in your visual aid, them going through the letters. So Mrs. Fletcher deduces from the letters that they're all written on different stationery. Some of them have magazine letters cut out, and they figure out that they're crank letters, that they're letters that are not true, because they say that a guy named Mr. Comedy destroyed someone else's car, but Mr. Comedy was actually in jail at the time because he owed alimony payments. Michael Comedy. So later that night, Mrs. Fletcher has dinner with Mr. Digby at her house, and she's distracted, and he's telling her how much he loves the recipe and that he's enjoying himself, and she's not actually listening to him. And he says, "What's wrong, Mrs. Fletcher?" And she says, I don't like what Elvira told Seth and Harry. I think I would like to go for a little walk. Maybe we can talk to her. So they go out for a walk, and Mr. Digby basically says, you know, if this was New York, I'd be looking around every corner for a mugger. It's so safe and peaceful here. Famous last words. As they round the corner, they find Elvira strung up on a tree in front of her house. Commercial break number 2. So when we come back, Mrs. Fletcher has called the sheriff, and she's in Elvira's house. Mr. Digby's outside, and he says, "Can you please hurry up, Mrs. Fletcher? I'm getting a little squeamish out here." And she looks, and she notices on the typewriter a note that Elvira typed. "I wrote the letters because you all turned against me. Now you know. You can gossip all you want now. Goodbye." Mrs. Fletcher looks around, notices a bunch of pills, a bunch of pans that line the wall, all of that, and suddenly a Mr. Morrison comes in through the back door. When he looks out the window, he goes, "Oh my God, she's dead." And she says, "Well, Mr. Morrison, it seems that you have suddenly changed nationalities. You no longer have a German accent." And he says, "Oh, I just do that for customers." Yeah, I have no idea what this guy does. So she says, "What are you doing here?" And he says, "I came to have it out with her." And Mrs. Fletcher looks at him and he goes, "Well, oh no, I wasn't going to kill her." He goes, "You know, she has been acting strange for a couple of months now, having her groceries delivered. She used to go out all the time, and now she hardly ever leaves. It was weird. Can't believe she killed herself." Suddenly the police show up, and he decides to sneak out the back, not wanting anything to do with the police. And he does before Mrs. Fletcher can stop him. So when Harry's about to take Elvira's body down, or tells another deputy or person to do it, Mrs. Fletcher says, "Wait a minute. Can you, let Seth examine her body first?" So he does. We cut to Mrs. Fletcher's house. Seth and Amos are there, and they're trying to figure out if Elvira really died via suicide or if she was murdered. Mrs. Fletcher comes up with the fact that there was not a scrap of handwritten paper in the whole room, just magazine letters, nothing to indicate she actually wrote the letter. And Amos happens to still have his letter, which talked about the fire at the old wooden lighthouse, and that he should check it out because there could be foul play. He knew that Beverly Garrett didn't do it because her alibi was solid, and he checked it out. He then gets his envelope out, and it came from Newbury, a neighboring town. And Mrs. Fletcher says, "Do you know anyone from Newbury?" And he says, "No, as a matter of fact, I don't." So, and he then says, "Come to find out." And Seth goes, "Will you spit it out, man?" He goes, "My letter was addressed Sheriff Amos Tupper, and I'm not the sheriff anymore, so this had to be mailed before Harry became sheriff. And maybe the Condo 3 had something to do with that fire." The next day, Mrs. Fletcher decides to go see Evelyn, who apologizes, and the most funny dialogue happens here. She says, "I should have known better. Charlie and I have been married for, 20 years or so now. And when we were together, it was hot and heavy. But then eventually his pilot light blew out." I'm sorry. And it's not been the same since then. So I should have known that he was not with you, Jessica. And I don't know what I was thinking. I accused you. And I swear I'm not making it up. If you've seen the episode, you know it's true. So Mrs. Fletcher asks Evelyn about Elvira's arthritis, because Seth figured out that she had arthritis, I guess, from examining her body. And she says, well, I'm not one to gossip about anyone. And then, of course, she does. She says, poor Elvira, she went into Newbury to basically visit another doctor because she didn't want anyone in town to know. She didn't want her kids to know because she didn't want them to send her to a nursing home. And she slowly had trouble doing things on her own. So that's why. So from this, we cut to Jessica's house, or no, we cut to the sheriff's office. Larry has been arrested because apparently he argued with Elvira before her death, and Mrs. Fletcher thinks that that's absurd because Elvira yelled at everyone, and Larry had no clear motivation to kill her. Then one of the random extras brings in Mr. Morrison, who was apparently trying to leave town with all his belongings. And Harry puts him in the back and says that they can't have lawyers until the morning. And he basically says, Jessica says, Harry, don't you think you should bring in the state police? And he goes, oh, you don't think I can do the job? Fine. I don't want to be sheriff no more. And he storms out. Later that night, Mr. Digby and Miss Fletcher are talking in her living room, and he says, you know, I can kind of tell that you are really confused about this whole murder thing. Is there anything I can do? I'm really good at solving crime. He ought to be. He's played by Parker Stevenson, who was one of the Hardy Boys. But anyway, Mrs. Fletcher says, actually, as a matter of fact, you can. Because earlier, that same day, she had ran into the Condo 3, which we find out is Mr. Nelson, Mr. Morton, and Mrs. Norris. And they asked her why she was asking around about the condos, and she said, because I don't think that condos should go up there and block that beautiful ocean view. Yeah, the Condo 3 have virtually no purpose in this episode other than to be the Condo 3. I don't know why. Anyway, Mrs. Fletcher suggests that Mr. Digby go to the local bar where the Condo 3 hang out to see if they had anything to do with the fire at the lighthouse, and to keep them busy as she figures things out. She decides to go back to Beverly Garrett's house and to look at things, and as she's looking downstairs, she notices there are wood chippings on the floor, and we find out that the killer was watching Beverly Garrett through the hole in the floor down in the basement. He had a clear view to be able to turn the power off and on when he needed to. Someone comes in the house, and it happens to be Seth, who's washing his hands in the bathroom. He was there looking around too, because secretly he still wants to be sheriff. As they're both trying to figure out, as Jessica figures out exactly how the murder happened, instructing it word for word, like it happened at the beginning of the episode, suddenly somebody else is in the house. It turns out that it was Adam, because Amos hits him with the back of the shovel, and he also gets put in the back of the jail for burglary charges. Apparently he was looking for the title for his boat or something. So then Seth and Amos are at Mrs. Fletcher's house again, talking about the murder again and eating some food. And when they get on the subject of the Condo 3, Mrs. Fletcher realizes that poor Mr. Digby has been there practically all night. So she calls him. Mrs. Norris, of course, is flirting with him. He seems to be drunk, but when Mrs. Fletcher calls, he's perfectly sober. He tells her, "Gee, I've been waiting for you to call." He says, "From what I can gather, the Condo 3 were out of town when the fire happened, so they had nothing to do with it." He said, "I've been pretending to be drunk. My father showed me a trick, putting sugar in there so I don't get drunk. So I've been kind of pretending." And then Mrs. Fletcher gets her epiphany, because basically Mr. Digby says that whoever it was that started the fire had a financial angle and had to be in real estate. There's a clue for you folks. So, Mrs. Fletcher says, "Okay, he was like, 'Can I come home now?' And she's like, 'No, you can't come home yet. Not yet. I need you to go back there, and I need you to make Mrs. Norris think she's getting something out of you, but don't make it too hard.' Okay." He staggers back to the table, and she gets back in, or he gets back in the booth with her, and she says, "What hotel are you staying at?" And he says, "I'm not staying at a hotel, I'm staying with Mrs. Fletcher." That was her, actually. And she starts, like, kissing him or something, and she says, "Well, what has she got that I haven't?" And he says, "Well, she's got a very sharp mind. She's basically figured out that somebody with that stood to gain from that community property deliberately burned down that wooden lighthouse." And she says, "Oh, really?" "Yep, and she's gonna go over to Beverly Garrett's house to see if she could find some clues." And Mrs. Norris suddenly says, "Excuse me, powder room." She gets up, goes to the payphone, dials a number, and then says, "You're busted, Buster. Someone's about to blow you wide open." We then cut to Beverly Garrett's house, and if you guys haven't figured it out yet, we're about to get there. She's going through a trunk when Harry suddenly walks in and comes down the basement stairs. He claims that he saw the light on in the basement and came to check to make sure nobody was trying to steal from her. The only problem is that there is no light in the basement because Mrs. Fletcher broke it when she was trying to hide from Adam earlier when she was at the house. But they forget that part. Harry said, "Mrs. Fletcher, what are you doing here?" And she says, "Well, I was waiting for someone to show up. I had a feeling it might be you, but I was hoping it wouldn't be." "Oh, Mrs. Fletcher, I told you I saw the light on and I decided, Harry, don't lie to me." She said, "You may be a very good liar, but you're a lousy killer." "I mean, it was sloppy work. You even admitted yourself. You slipped up, Harry. You said to Amos that the cord was frayed. Only it wasn't. Larry Barnes fixed her set a couple weeks before. The only way that you could have known that the cord was frayed was if you doctored it yourself. And the wood chippings on the floor, having a perfect view when she went into the bathtub. But the question is, why? Then you killed an innocent woman to cover your tracks. You sent a bunch of letters out because you didn't know which one had been sent. And it was the one that was addressed to Amos about the suspicious fire. You did the fire, Harry. You were the one who stood the most to gain selling that property. Jessica, this is crazy, he says. I've known you for 20 years. I sold you your house. She says, that's why this makes it so hard. And then he admits it, basically saying that Beverly was blackmailing him and wouldn't let well enough alone, laughing in his face, and so he decided to kill her. And then he killed an innocent woman who had nothing to do with it other than the fact that she mailed one letter. All this for property that does not really end up becoming anything as far as I know. And then Harry has the gall to take out a gun like he's gonna shoot Jessica. But lucky for him, of course, Seth and Amos are there. And that's the end of Harry Pierce in John Austen's time on Murder, She Wrote. The episode ends with Mr. Digby leaving town and deciding not to do an article about Cabot Cove, wanting to leave it the same as when he came. Overall, the character of Harry Pierce was very interesting. I knew that something happened to him because Eve Simpson becomes the real estate agent from here on out. I don't exactly remember when she has her first episode, but I knew that something happened to him. I just couldn't remember what. So let's go over his full credentials, and it was really great to have him on the show. I thoroughly enjoyed his performance. I just recently saw him in National Lampoon's European Vacation, and a very inappropriate role that did not age very well. He played a game show host, and he started making out with their daughter on air. It was weird. Like, I didn't know what the hell I was watching. Needless to say, I didn't continue it after that. It was a weird movie. Alright. John Austen for the final time here. He is still alive. He is known for The Frighteners, The Return of the Killer Tomatoes, National Lampoon's European Vacation, as I just said, and Evil Roy Slade. His last known credit is doing voice work for Justice League Action. He did a lot of voiceover work in Recess, The Wild Thornberrys, and so many others. Yes, he made his first appearance in Hooray for Homicide, which was the second episode of Season 1, where Jessica went to Hollywood. He made his first appearance in Joshua Peabody Died Here Possibly, then in Lady in the Lake, and then this is his final appearance as Harry Pierce, but apparently he comes back in 1995 as a totally different character. Even though the trivia says this is his last appearance on the show. But I thoroughly enjoyed him as Harry Pierce. And he played Sylvester in the Addams Family, so that was interesting. Oh, I'm sorry. The guy with the German accent was actually called Mr. Hoffman. I don't know why I thought his name was Mr. Morrison. It's weird, but he was played by Paul Benedict. And he didn't get much to do in this episode. He died in 2008 at the age of 70. He's known for being in The Jeffersons, The Addams Family Movie, The Goodbye Girl, and Jeremiah Johnson. His last known credit is Side by Each, I guess, a movie. He guest starred on The Drew Carey Show, Tales from the Crypt, A Different World, Sesame Street. This is his only episode of Murder, She Wrote. All in the Family, Yeah, his main picture looks familiar to me, but he looked really different on this episode. But he didn't get much to do, which is so sad. Neither did Betsy Palmer, who did a lot in this too. Joseph Campalana played George Kep, one of the Condo Three. He did not get much to do in this episode. Hopefully he gets to be in another... He'll be in another episode. I remember him being on the Golden Girls. He was good on the Golden Girls. He died in 2018 at the age of 93. He is known for the original One Day at a Time, No Retreat, No Surrender, and the television series The Practice. His last known credit is a movie in 2009 called Lost Dream. He guest starred on CSI, the original. He was on The Bold and Beautiful as Jonathan Young. Cold Case, The Division, love that show. Star Trek Voyager, Biography as a narrator. Melrose Place. Spider-Man the Animated Series. Touched by an Angel, Pacific Blue. Walker, Texas Ranger. Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, Batman the Animated Series, Baywatch, Days of Our Lives as Harper Devereaux, Knots Landing, Beauty and the Beast TV series, 21 Jump Street, the original Dallas, Mama's Family, and he'll appear in another episode of Murder, She Wrote, so we will go over more of his credentials when we get to that one. And hopefully he'll get more than one line in that episode. Larry the Repairman was played by John David Carson. He passed away in 2009 at the age of 57. He is known for Pretty Woman, Empire of the Ants, Space Ghost, and Falcon Crest. His last known credit is Pretty Woman and Falcon Crest. This is the only episode of Murder, She Wrote. He guest starred in Simon & Simon, The Law and Harry McGraw, Blake's Magic, Three's Company, Bring 'Em Back Alive, Chips, the original Chips, Taxi, Hawaii Five-0, original Charlie's Angels, The Life and Times of Grizzly Adams, Barnaby Jones, Policewoman, The Wild World of Mystery, all the great ones. He was in 53 different things, so he had a long and prosperous career. May you rest in peace. Elvira was played by Marcia Hunt. She was our murder victim. She's still alive. She's known for Pride and Prejudice 1940, Bride by Mistake, Lost Angel, and Raw Deal. Her last known credit is 2008's Empire State Building Murders TV movie. Never heard of it. She guest starred on Madlock. This is her only episode of Murder, She Wrote. She was in the original Ironside, Marcus Welby, MD, Fear No Evil, The Outsider, My Three Sons, Twilight Zone, Gunsmoke. So she had a really long career. She was in 116 different things. Maybe she was in something with Angela Lansbury. Evelyn Keyes played... Oh. I could have swore they were saying that her name was Evelyn, not Edna. Maybe they mispronounced it. She died in 2008 at the age of 91. She's known for The 7-Year Itch with Marilyn Monroe, The Prowler, Gone with the Wind, and The Killer That Stalked New York. Oh! and she'll appear in a handful of other episodes of Murder, She Wrote. So we will go over her credentials once we get to those other episodes. That's her last known credit. Let's see. Mr. Anderson was played by Danny Miller, a small character that didn't get to do much. He died in 2014 at the age of 80. He is known for The Party, Tarzan the Ape Man, The $6 Million Man, and Doomsday Machine. His last known credit is Hell to Pay 2005. He guest starred on Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman, Lonesome Dove, the series, Werewolf, Outlaws, Magnum P.I., the original, Hillcrest and McCormick, and this is the only episode of Murder, She Wrote. He guest starred on the original Knight Rider, the original Dallas, the original DVV, Simon and Simon, The Misadventures of Sheriff Lobo, The Incredible Hawk, MASH, When the Whistle Blows, Young Maverick, The Runaways, The Rockford Files, Battlestar Galactica, the original, Barnaby Jones. So yeah, he was a really good, and he didn't get to do that much in this episode, which is really sad. He didn't get much to do. Then Mrs. Norris was played by Betsy Palmer, whom I said was from Friday the 13th. She didn't get much to do in this episode either, which is really sad because she was really awesome. And it's so sad she's no longer with us. She died in 2015 at the age of 88. And she was in a movie with Joan Crawford called Queen Bee in 1955. I didn't know that. She's known for the first Friday the 13th, the second Friday the 13th, Mr. Rogers, and Penny Dreadful from 2005. The last thing that she was in was Bell Witch the movie as the Bell Witch. And I know that she's in... Oh, she was on the original Knots Landing. Yeah, she's in another episode of Murder, She Wrote, so I'll go over more of her credentials later. I think she was a very talented actress. And it's sad she didn't get much to do in this episode. Parker Stevenson played the role of Michael Digby. He is still alive. He is known for Probe, Mistrust, The Hardy Boys, The Nancy Drew Mysteries, and Baywatch. He is currently going to be in a movie called Last Call in the Doghouse. His last known credit is Greenhouse Academy. Never heard of that. He's of course been in several Hallmark Channel original Christmas movies. Baywatch. Melrose Place as Steve McMullen. That was a really weird role. The original Mission Impossible, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, The Hitchhiker, North and South Book 2 as Billy Hazard, Madlock, and this is his only episode of Murder, She Wrote. I'm kind of surprised, because, the show was on so long, he could have made another appearance. He was on the original Falcon Crest, Blood Boat, Hotel, The Hardy Boys, Nancy Drew Mysteries as Frank, Lifeguard, and Gunsmoke. He's been acting since 1972 and is still going strong. 162 projects later. And then rounding out the Condo 3 is Christopher Stone as Mr. Oh wait. No, Christopher Stone played Adam, I'm sorry. He died in 1995 at the age of 55. He's known for The Howling, Cujo, The New Lassie, and The Junkman. Oh yeah, he was in Cujo. His last known credit is Sweet Justice. He was on Days of Our Lives as Bill Horton. And he will be in another episode of Murder, She Wrote, so we will go over more of his credentials a little bit later. I'm sorry, sometimes it's really hard to figure out who played who. Mr. Nelson is rounding out the Condo 3, and he was played by Howard Witt. He died in 2017. He's known for Simon & Simon, The Magical World of Disney, and Ruchy Brookman Private Eye. His last known credit is something called Red Blue. It's a short. He was in a TV movie based on Death of the Salesman, the original Law and Order, Magical World of Disney, The Golden Girls, the original Knots Landing. This is his only episode of Murder, She Wrote. He guest starred in Simon & Simon, the original Taxi, Amanda's. That was a show that was before Bea Arthur got the Golden Girls. It was a really funny show. You should check it out on YouTube. Alice, Heart to Heart, Revenge of the Stepford Wives, really good TV movie. Mrs. Columbo, 8 is Enough, The Incredible Hulk, Rhoda, love that show. Charlie's Angels, The Bob Newhart Show, and Days of Our Lives as Lieutenant Joe Blake. And that is our guest stars. Overall, this was a really great episode. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's really sad that Harry is, a killer now. And that, that's the way they ended his character, but I guess, that's the way that he crumbles. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Thank you for all your likes, your comments, and everything you said. A person commented on my last video wanting me to cover a Season 4 episode, and believe you me, I will get there. Just give me some time, I will get there. But thank you so much for the comment. As well as thank you for your continued support in the Facebook groups, All Things Murder, She Wrote, and Jessica Fletcher Murder, She Wrote. Your support means the world to me. Thank you so much. Happy crime solving, and I will see you in the next one.